Hello and welcome to part 4, lesson number 4 in our series, 5 Lessons 2025 Try to Teach You. Right? Number 1, keep the feedback coming. I love the inboxes. I love the feedback. I appreciate all of it. So definitely keep the feedback coming. Okay. So today we are on part 4 of 5 and really part 4 of 6 because I have decided to add a 6th day, okay, of our ongoing season or our ongoing series rather. And as you know, if you've been following on along, the number one reason why I decided to do this season, Lord have mercy, look at me. The number one reason why I decided to do this series is because most of what will stop you in 2026 are problems that you did not solve in 2025. Okay. The new things are not the things that typically get in our way. Every once in a while, yes. Okay. But mostly it's just us in our own way. So, our objective with this series is just to increase your awareness, right? To try to quiet some of the noise, both the internal noise, right? The things that we're saying to ourselves, but also just the noise that we have, in our world, be it our households, be it the economy, be it political system, et cetera, right? And my hope is that as I increase your awareness about what it takes to hit the goals, not just set them, then you can choose, right? Which of these things really apply to me. So also don't forget that we want you using the hashtag the couch, right? Not just for this series, but anytime you hear something, on the podcast that you like, appreciate, etc. We do give free things out and reduced things out every single month. So let's just jump straight in to our lesson number 4. Okay. So lesson number 4 of 6 is the importance of first principles thinking. Okay. So for those of you who have not heard of first principles thinking, I actually called it something completely different and then later learned that it was a real concept. And it's like, oh, that's the real name of it, right? But in short, first principles thinking is all about learning to do what is necessary, not what is nice, not necessarily what is new, but what is actually required and keeping it simple. It's like, what is the principle of the thing that you are trying to do? So, for example, let's say that you wanted to improve your marriage, right? Well, there are lots of things that you could do to improve your marriage. You could go on retreats and you could have date nights and you could have more sex and you could work on your communication, et cetera, right? There is a never ending list of things that you could do. But when you adopt first principle thinking, you know the things that must be done. Okay. That's the essence of first principles thinking. And so here's what I want you to hear. In 2025 and probably 24 and 23, okay, I just want to say you're doing too much. Like so many people are doing all the things, right? They're doing the wrong things. Sometimes they're doing the right things, but they're doing it the wrong way. And all of this is a huge part of what creates delay or just complete denials, meaning we just never reached the goal in the first place, right? We are the busiest, most burnt out generation, and yet still living in survival, right? That's the crazy part, right? If we were busy and successful, not survival success, we're going to talk about, what the difference is between successful versus survival success. Then it might make a little bit more sense why we work 50 hours a week and right. And in some ways, that is true. There's more millionaires than there's ever been. There's more billionaires than there's ever been. So there is a group of people who it makes sense for. But the vast majority of people are still living in survival mode. And to be clear, survival mode is not just about money, right? Like we often hear the word survival and we think people are broke. But I started to talk about what I call survival success, which is people who run 6-figure businesses, 7-figure businesses, have good take home pay, right? They have businesses that are successful, that are doing well. and they're still in survival. Well, why? How can you be in survival and your business is making good money? Well, not having the things that you desire is a big part of it. Not being able to spend your time the way that you want to spend your time. So a great example of this is that the business still depends on you, even though you're bringing home 200, 500K, a million, whatever. You can't walk away. Oh, that's still survival. The business is doing well, right? But I don't have any time freedom. That's an example of how it's not just about money. Okay. It's more about just this overall lack of alignment in the most important areas, right? We talked a little bit about alignment in day 2. Okay. So if there was one thing that 2025 was trying to teach us, it is to sat your ass down somewhere. Okay. Yes. And I said sat your ass. Okay. I said it. It's a little ironic, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. I promise you that it does not take 50 hours a week for 5 years to hit 7 figures. Right? Are there times where there are busy seasons? Sure. Right? It's not always rainbows and flowers, right? But I can almost guarantee you that the goal that you set for yourself, right? Like what I want you to be able to do is the goal that you have set for yourself is the effort that you're putting in getting you the results. Like that's the thing that we need to be looking at, examining, monitoring. Is it bringing you the right results? Because the average person that I see is far from lazy. Yes, they have their moments where they like, I ain't doing nothing else. Don't ask me, get somebody else to do it. Which usually comes when they're, closer to burnout or full-blown burnout. But for the most part, I don't see a lot of lazy people. I don't see a lot of people not putting in effort, right? And yet they're not getting the right results for that effort, right? This is an example of survival success, right? Where you have money, right? You have some level of reputation, etc. But some of these key things that you want, one of the biggest areas I see is single women who have built successful businesses and they desire to be in a healthy relationship, but they do not have that. And obviously, not having something doesn't make you in survival mode, but not having something for an extended period of time, right? Not even being able to put your time and attention. Because a lot of times, what I see, specifically with single women who actually desire a relationship, they're so wrapped up in the business, they wouldn't have time for a man anyway. Right? So not having the relationship you want, not having the health or the body, the money, the impact, whatever it might be, right? Being trapped in a business where you're making a bunch of money but not actually doing what you're called to do. All of those are examples of survival. So the question becomes, why the heck do we overcomplicate things, right? Because first principles thinking is about doing what is necessary. And usually there are, much smaller number of things that are necessary than what we're doing. We are overcomplicating it and doing all kinds of things that are nice, but not required, right? So why do so many of us do things that are just not necessary? Okay. So number one, the biggest one is fear, right? Like we are really optimizing for safety, right? And when we're optimizing for safety, we're always optimizing for the wrong thing. Yes, we all want to feel safe. There's nothing wrong with that, especially as women. But that's not the same as optimizing for safety, right? When we're optimizing for safety, right, we're essentially hedging our bets. And that comes from a place of fear and scarcity. Okay, so fear is definitely a big part of that. Another one is just ambition. And ambition is not necessarily bad, to be clear, right? But a lot of times what I see is that people are so committed, right, to whatever it is that they're feeling called to do, right? So willing to do whatever it takes that they end up in a lot of self-sacrifice, right? They end up sacrificing quite a bit, even though self-sacrifice was never necessary, but that is what their ambition was leading them to do, right? Intention's good. Intention's in the right spot, but it lends itself to hustle, which is yet another reason why we end up in this space where we are not operating from a first principles mindset, is that our culture promotes hustle, we are rewarded for doing more, faster, bigger, better, right? Effort, effort, effort. And so, of course, if we are in, a westernized culture that supports that, that's going to rub off on us if we're not careful. Another reason is that we often don't know and or won't accept what is required, right, for the goal that we have, right? This is a big one. We either don't know, right? We haven't been able to pull out the principles of the thing that we want to do, right? Or we pulled out the principles, but we won't accept their principles. That's where I really want to put our attention today. Okay. So when we start talking about first principles thinking, we're really talking about making decisions, taking action based on the core truths. Okay. I remember hearing my pastor say one time, you can't outwork principle. And I was like, what? That's so true. I posted about this. I found the post not long ago, and it was back in 2019. I was like, ooh, that's crazy. I've been at this for a little while. And what I called it was the difference between method and formula, right? And it's essentially the same concept as first principles thinking, where when you understand the formula, then the method can change many times, right? The formula is the core components. They have to be there every time. But I could change the formula to have different methods. That's the gist of what I was saying, right? What you want to be able to ask yourself is, what are the non-negotiables, right? Every single domain of our life has them. So no matter what goals you set for yourself, whether they're health goals, relationship goals, business goals, personal finance goals, etc., every single one of them has non-negotiables, right? So again, if I, let's say I was trying to improve my relationship, right? Well, what would be the first principles thinking, right? What would be the non-negotiables? Okay, well, there would need to be trust. There would need to be communication. There would need to be time, etc. All of those things are 100% required for a healthy relationship. Now, how we communicate can look very different from person to person. How much time we spend can look different from person to person. But it's not if we spend the time. It's not if we communicate. It's not if there is trust. It is, what does trust look like in our relationship? Same thing with business, right? Non-negotiable. There must be marketing. There must be sales. There must be delivery. Everything else, negotiable. I know we love automation in the online space, right? And I'm pro automation, but did you know that automation was not required, right? It's not necessary. Does it make running the business easier? Yes, it does. So I'm not saying don't automate. What I am saying is that don't get so caught up in the things that are nice that we barely do the things that are necessary. The non-negotiables are marketing, sales, and delivery. Okay. Then it gets even more nuanced as we think through this, right? Based on whatever it is that you want, right? So let's say that one of the goals that you had was parenting related. Okay. And one of the things that you are actively doing is raising Christian kids. Okay. That's your thing. Okay, great. Maybe that's very important to you. Well, what does that require? Like, what are the first principles, the non-negotiables of raising Christian kids? Right? That's the kind of thing that we want. Because there's, again, a lot of things that you could do, but not all of them are necessary. Right? Not all of them are required. And when we put our attention, our focus on the things that are nice, but not necessary, we end up wasting a lot of time, energy, and money. Right? So awareness is always first, right? Learning, what does the thing that I want to do require? If I want to buy, let's say I want to build a house, well, what goes into that? Those are the kind of things that we want to start thinking about. Then once we're aware, right, of what goes into what we're asking, then we need to accept, right? First, we learn what is required, then we do what is required. Right. One a good example of this is that when I was early in the online marketing space, online coaching industry kind of space, and I was learning about webinar math, right? And they were talking about, oh, 2,000 people are going to land on the landing page, and maybe 200 or 300 or whatever are going to opt in, right? And then the numbers just keep going down. Or you might have a 20% conversion rate if it's, a really good page, but normally it's blank, right? And then, only 50% of the people will show up, right? So now I'm at 100, leads. And then by the time they go to the webinar or whatever it is that you're, you know, using to teach and show and document, now it's only 5% that ever even see your pitch, right? The first time I ever saw the webinar math, I was like, who the hell is getting ready to do that? I had all kind of resistance. You mean to tell me I'm going to push all this traffic only for 10 people? Because when you do the math, you start off with 1,000 people, but you end up with 10 people actually seeing the offer. And I'm like, what is this, ludicrous? What? Right? So I had resistance. I was not accepting what is required, right? If that was the strategy that I was going to use, I needed to accept what is required of me, right? What the numbers is. Yes, the numbers can, fluctuate, but the math is the math, right? So that's a great example of how first we need to learn what is required. Then we need to accept what is required. And then we need to increase our ability to do what is required well, right? Because that's the other case, is that a lot of times we're putting in a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of work. We're not actually doing what is required well. So if I use my funnel example from just a second ago, it's like, okay, let's say somebody told me what was necessary. I got the math, step one, right? I learned. Number two, I accepted, all right, I'm gonna have to push a lot of traffic in order, got it. I've accepted, right? But the last one, the ability, right, is to be able to say, oh, I've gotten really good at hooks at the top of my landing page that make people want to actually opt in. Oh, I've gotten really good at pushing the right kind of traffic that actually calls in qualified leads, right? It's like I can know what to do and just not be good at doing. Okay. So here's my suggestion for you. This is what 2026 really is asking of you, friend. Okay. Number one, become. Okay. You have to learn to do what is necessary, not just what is nice. Right? We have to learn to keep the main thing the main thing. Inside of our program, one of the things that we talk about is how the goal is not to become legendary. Right? It is not. Sometimes we talk about all of this like personal branding stuff with a lot of main character energy, which I think is actually not helpful. I get why people do that. There is an element of confidence that has to be present. Right? But what we talk about inside of our program is that the goal is not to become legendary, but you will have to become legendary to reach the goal. That's what we want to be able to understand. Right? So our first step is to learn to do what is like one of the other things we talk about inside of our program is how this is not about doing your best. You might already be doing your best. Right? This is about learning to do what is required. And it's like, you want me to do more? A lot of times it's not about more, it's about different. Oh, you're already putting in time and energy and money. Now we just need to learn how to do it differently. Okay? So our first step is, how do I become? What does it look like to do what is actually required and get out of our comfort zone? The second thing I would say is you need to identify the non-negotiables, the requirements, first principles, whatever you want to call it, of the goal that you're trying to accomplish. Because every single goal has different principles. Okay? Half the stuff you are doing is not required, friend. That's what I want you to hear. Right? Your work is to be able to identify, well, what is required? Of all the things that I could do, which are the ones that are most important that move the needle? Right? And then you just have to learn to do the things the right way. People get really frustrated when their hard work doesn't pay off. Oh, I'm pushing a lot of content, right? But it's not generating leads or it's not generating sales, right? And then they say, oh, it doesn't work. It's not that it doesn't work. A lot of people push content and a lot of people get sales and leads. So it's not that it doesn't work. It's that you're doing it in the wrong way, right? That's what we want to be able to acknowledge. Here's a great example that I would love to share to help bring this home. So I was having a conversation with a guy. Okay? This is a guy who was in a relationship and had cheated in his relationship. Okay. They decided that they were going to stay together, see if they can make it work. Okay. And in the midst of, rebuilding trust, one of the things that would happen is that the girlfriend would go through his phone, right? Now, we could be mad about that or we could not, right? He personally did not make it a big deal. He understood that that's what came with breaking trust. So kudos to him for that. Um, but here's the challenge, right? She goes to the phone, she sees something, a Facebook message, not message, but a Facebook, who is this girl kind of thing. And then the male would respond to her question with trying to better understand where she's at emotionally, right? Like, obviously, you're still feeling like, I'm not trustworthy. Obviously, you're still blah, 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 blah. And eventually he would answer the question, right? And say, I don't know that girl, or she's only a Facebook friend, or whatever is true, right? And the challenge, even though his intentions were in the right spot, right? He spent 5-10 minutes, you know, trying to figure out, well, what are you really feeling? What do you really need? How can I help you feel safe? Blah, blah, blah. Right. But the problem is, and this is what I explained to him, is that what's happening is that you're trying to use communication as the primary way that you solve the problem in your relationship. And unfortunately, communication is just one tool that you use to solve a trust problem, right? You've probably heard me say this at some point, but a big part of our responsibility is to learn how to name the problem accurately. Okay, so in this case, trust issue. That's the problem. We have a trust issue. Got it. So once I name the problem correctly, then I can try to name the solution correctly, right? So in this case, he was using communication as his only way, or maybe primary way, of solving a trust problem. And it's like, well, unfortunately, communication by itself will not solve a trust problem, friend, right? So we don't actually need to, try to figure out what's going on with you and how are you feeling and what do you need. We don't need to do that every single time, because we just accept that no amount of communication will actually solve a trust problem by itself. This is an example of, well, what does solve a trust problem? That's number one. I need to be clear about what's required. What is the solution for the problem that I'm having? Right? Then number two is I need to accept. You mean to tell me there's other things in addition to communication? Yes. Communication is just one thing. When we start talking about, actually solving a trust problem, there must be time, there must be communication, there must be changed behavior, right? And these things are nuanced, especially changed behavior and communication, right? I could be doing all kinds of communication. He was doing all kind of communication, right? But remember, we talked about you have to be doing the right thing and you have to be doing it the right way, right? And these are skills, meaning there are levels to how good I am at the thing. Okay. Now, to be clear, I recognize that much of what I'm talking about is easier said than done, right? It's not always easy to do, right? We talk about the difference between being simple and being easy, right? What I am saying is simple, but it's not necessarily easy to implement, right? So if you hear something that you feel like you need support with, reach out, right? We'd be happy to support you, happy to tell you more about our programs, of course. But most importantly, are you implementing first principles thinking in 2026, or will you be spreading yourself too thin and focused on all kinds of things that do not matter